As time moves forward, our society has changed faster and faster every year. The past century of life on Earth has seen some of the most monumental shifts in how humans interact with each other and the world around them. Technology has advanced at lightning speed, and there have been incredible shifts in our traditions, our laws, and even how we communicate with one another. While some of these changes can definitely be scary, humanity has also made incredible advancements in life-saving medical practices and wrestled with how to become more humane in how we treat one another. We've learned to question the missteps of the people who came before us. Although the process continues to be a messy one, more and more people seem to be struggling toward a future where people look out for each other, regardless of our differences. For generations growing up in this rapidly advancing world, church can feel like an artifact from another time. And in a society where questions and curiosity are held up as really important values, there's an increasing tension between the rising generations and anywhere that feels unwilling or unable to grow and change. This is one major reason why young people tend to disconnect from organized religion in their early adult years. Conversations around the youth exodus often focus on why young people leave the church. But what if young people today are being pushed out of the church when that isn't really what they wanted in the first place? What if, in our desire to reject worldliness and sin, we've instead rejected people who simply wanted to understand God and the world around them more deeply? What if church has become a place that no longer fosters growing personal relationships with God and our neighbor? And what if that tension is the beginning of the end for curious people? As a kid, Jessie was heavily involved in his church. He even spent many years dreaming of becoming a pastor, but as he grew older, several personal experiences caused him to question his place in church. What can we learn from stories like Jessie's? We'll explore all that and more on this episode of Bridges Over Walls.
If I were to say what separates the older generation and the younger generation in my church, in my experience with a Hispanic church, is besides the very heavy leaning towards a little more kind of conservative rigidity in how you worship and how you praise and how you live as a Christian, there was also just kind of a lack of curiosity from the older generation. Like, oh, I kind of wonder how things are done by another church, or why do they kind of seem to be a little more excited?
Why are they happy?
Yes. It's so sad to talk about this because it's kind of ridiculous. That's what it is. A lot of them are still there, but it's empty now.
Mhm.
Like when I was there, sure, there were some hardships as far as just how the community was built, and kind of it felt fractured at times between the families that built the community of the church. But it was big. There was a lot of members, and now it's just empty.
Yeah.
And it's sad.
How much do you think fear plays a role in all of that? When I think about, and obviously I can't actually simulate in my own brain what it's like because it's not an experience I have.
Mm-hmm.
But if I think about moving somewhere where I don't speak the language, starting a new life, trying to navigate all of these challenges, and just wanting the people that I love most to be around me as long as possible, right? And then I think about the fear of losing your kids, the fear of them becoming integrated into a world you may not have access to or understand or like. I can see how it can be not just a I need to be controlling thing, but like man, if they go into this place that they like more, they'll leave me.
I could definitely see that being one of the factors easily. They love their kids, but at the same time, that kind of grasp on them was pretty tight in an unhealthy way, especially in the world of like faith and finding love within it and community within it. You got to be able to let go. And if you don't stay at your home church, you're abandoning them. That's kind of the fear that played into my church. Like you say that, like, how much did fear play a part into those feelings of like, oh, uh, stay with us. Like, that's pretty oppressive, especially if you're growing up and this is all you know. Like, Christianity in this form is all you know. Can you blame any teenager for being like, I don't want this anymore?
Yeah.
It's really hard to stay in that and continue to want to follow that if that's all you know.
There's a powerful quote in one of our other interviews where our guest said, you lose everyone you try to control. This is the way. You don't ask questions, you don't doubt it, you just do it kind of mentality. Didn't leave any room for personal growth, personal spirituality, right?
But the younger generation has that curiosity. We all kind of figure out what we want out of our Christianity. But even the ones that might have left later on, they were trying to do what they could with their own talents. Like, some of them are great musicians, but they play the drums, they play the electric guitar.
Can't do it.
Nope. No, you guys are talented, but nope, not gonna happen. And I feel like, at least in my experience, a lot of the younger generation tried that. There seemed to be a want for that connection that the generation before them wasn't really opening up for them. A lot of them started to go to other churches or tried to do their own stuff outside of church. And I was too young to like participate at that time, but I kind of felt for the older generation too. I could see their heart was in the right place, but they just couldn't connect. It was structured, but in a way that it didn't need to be. Like, the overly structured way that they went about trying to reach out with gospel, it didn't leave any room for anything new. And a lot of the times it just made it so that Sabbaths were pretty sadly kind of dead, And that's a harsh thing to say, but it left you wanting more out of your own faith. People wanted to work for charities and kind of go out there and do ministry, but there was never there was never an open door for that, if you could believe that. It was really weird. I was very lucky that, in my experience, my parents allowed me to do that, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. It was never really forced into a particular direction, but it was very regimented. Saturday, Friday night, we stop watching TV, or we follow all the little guidelines for Saturday. Saturday's just church in the morning, church in the afternoon. What's weird is, just talking about it now, those years almost seem like a blur because they were just kind of the way things were, right? I remember when I wanted to be baptized, I was maybe around 11, and it felt genuine. But at the same time, it also almost felt like the thing to do, I feel like I've heard that a lot, when you're little and you're born in the church. Sometimes it just feels like, oh, this is the next step. But to me, it was a little bit of both, right? It felt like the next step in just like being a Christian kid. But also it felt like right to me. Like, it was always a part of my day to day, even outside of the Saturdays. Saturdays were the main day, but for the most part, we were doing, kind of not daily scriptures, but just kind of Bible study type of habits that kind of naturally picked up with me and my brother and my sister. It's kind of weird to look back on it because it was consistent to the point that it was kind of blurry as a memory. But I feel like when I hit maybe 15, that's when I actually started to kind of actually develop my own sense of faith. And I think that's when I kind of started to feel, I don't know, I could see the weirdly loose threads of how there was something missing in the formula of my particular Spanish church. Like, it felt so detached from day-to-day actual life, right? If that makes sense. I feel like they had the right intentions as far as like building a community, but at the same time, it was very hard for them to see individuals as people. There was a lot of moments where there was just a huge uh, detached kind of relationship between a lot of the members there and their kids. This isn't new information. We hear this everywhere. Uh, the older generation doesn't know how to work with the younger generation, especially when it comes to things like faith or beliefs or a personal path. And yeah, when I hit 15 years old, that was an itch that was hard to scratch and figure out. It was like, okay, I feel like I want this faith in me to continue, but I also just don't know how to go about it outside in my day-to-day life. I was already thinking about college, and I was just like, how is this going to look 5 years from now? Am I still going to want to be in the same church? Am I going to want to even be a pastor? Just all these general questions, right? That you're probably going to have as a 15, 16-year-old angsty teenager. So I was getting involved in substituting for Sabbath school classes when I was in my early teens, because I was like, I want to spread the love that I can feel in my own life. And so I'm teaching, I'm studying on my own time. And like, I absolutely wanted to be there. Like, I was there fighting my shyness, incredibly shy when I was a teenager, like incredibly, but I felt my calling was really strong. And I was like, I want to talk about this. I want to be this person. It feels right. It feels genuine to me. And I wanted to be a teacher. And there I am planning out my Sabbath school lessons the day before, stressed out. So I'm just like, is this any good? Am I getting too pretentious? I can't be pretentious. It's just like it was me figuring out who I am as a 15, 16-year-old. I wanted to find my genuine self as a Christian wanting to be a pastor. And I started to look for kind of mentorship from people within my church. And I think this is kind of when I got a little let down. One of the elders from the church showed up one day to one of my classes, and he just pokes his head in, and I was like, all right. So I continue, and he kind of saunters in, and he I can visualize it. He's like going around the perimeter of the room, taking it in, and then he sits down at the very back. And then class ends, everyone stands up, they leave, and he's just like there, like kind of pontificating with his hand on his chin, right? And then I'm like kind of making my way, and he's like, can I talk to you?
No.
I believe there's still a few more people there. And then that's when he was like, we'll talk when after class and everyone leaves. And I remember he was incredibly disappointed with my class. And he was like going through this very long conversation. It's like 15 to 30 minutes of him just telling me what I did wrong. And his biggest issue with my teaching was, I think he just said I was much too casual, which to me came off like a compliment, because I want my faith to be easy every day of the week. It shouldn't need to be kind of like the scary, okay, now you got to straighten up and fly right.
Yeah.
It's
and natural.
It's Saturday.
Yeah.
It's no, that's kind of what bothered him, is that I was, I don't know, happy. But yeah, he was very particular about how I went about talking about Christ and love and being open to others. But when he was done and he left, I remember I was just incredibly crushed. I was like, man, that particular day was a very good day. It felt so natural. It felt like we all understood each other and we had a good Sabbath. And the best he could do was find some personal slight out of it. I can see where it could be very strange for the older generation to kind of see something different. But at the same time, as a 31-year-old man, I'm just like, get over yourself. Come on. I could not imagine 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 51, looking at a 15-year-old preach
Yeah.
and then being like, hey, let me talk to you a minute. Like, that's so weird. And it's not just weird because it's strange. It's disrespectful to that person's own experience. What good comes of that? And sometimes there are moments where you can mentor someone, but those moments where it's very specifically going through their own interpretation of a good message and giving it out to people that are their age, that's awesome. Just let them do it. Let them take those 45 minutes in the day and just let them be. That's a tricky topic for me because I feel like there could be so much that could be done to kind of heal or at least brace older generations for that kind of transfer of, yeah, these are some of the younger people that are going to come in and you're going to see them more and they're going to grow up in front of your eyes and they're going to be talking about things that they're passionate about. That shouldn't be threatening. It hurt more than it should have because at the end of the day, he's for the most part like a stranger, but in a way that also kind of made it hurt a little more because it was like this guy felt so inclined to be like, you're doing it wrong.
And those moments are so much more traumatizing than they might seem in a story like this.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I first started coming back to church and I was asked to be a guest preacher somewhere. No pastoral background, nothing. They're asking a lot of somebody that doesn't have any theological training, right? And so I say yes. And I remember after the service, this older couple cornered me in the church lobby, and they're between me and anywhere. I'm literally in a corner in the lobby, and they're here, right? And they were angry. and they were like, let me see that Bible. And I hold it up, and they're like, that's not the King James Bible. And I was like, I've never preached from the King James Bible. And they spent a good 15 minutes just tearing me down and saying, like, you have no right to be up there, all of this stuff. And I didn't invite me there. I just said yes when somebody asked, and then to this day, I remember it was the most, like, I almost laughed out loud because when they were done insulting and tearing me down and everything because I didn't have a King James Bible, they said, you should come to our midweek Bible study. We don't have any young people. We can't get young people to show up. And I was like, why in the world, after all of this, why in the world do you think that I would want to be there? And I've carried that. That's, I don't know, close to a decade ago now.
Yeah.
And still to this day, there's a fear when I go up in a new church, when I go to talk to a new group of people. I want to know everything I can about them. And I want to know, because in that moment, it wasn't just that these two people came and did something that bothered me. It was like, did anyone see it? Is anyone there to offer an alternative? Is somebody there going to say, hey, no, that's not who we are. This is just one guy, two people, whatever. And unfortunately, often you're met with a lot of silence. You're met with a lot of people looking away. You're met with, people, even if they don't think of it exactly that way, they tolerate it enough where it becomes a normalized part of a local church culture.
That was probably something that I was looking for, was someone to be like, hey, that was wrong. I didn't get any of that. I just kind of had to figure it out myself.
Yeah.
Which is always even more confusing because it's like, okay, that was a good day. And then this happened. And now you just kind of have to be like, okay, how do I go about processing that? Do I take it incredibly personally, which I did?
We almost need like elder allies in this work, because in a situation where the norm is to not listen to or respect anyone younger than you, in a situation where children and young people are to be seen, not heard, it doesn't matter what we say. We can say stuff all day long. It doesn't mean that we're listened to or that people process what we say. We almost need someone that is respected by our elders to tell them. What I'm seeing is church after church closing their door, and there being very few people left because they never learned. They never tried. They never took into consideration, like, what is the damage that we're doing? They've outsourced everything to, well, if it's God's will, he'll bring the people. Well, we have a part to play in that.
Yeah.
and often we're working against it.
I can't understand just leaving it entirely to God when your faith and your beliefs should mirror a kind of healthy understanding of relationships with people. Like, it's very strange to just be like, we're going to leave it to God. It's like, but you have people in your direct life that maybe you've affected in a way that no longer want to be here. That is not leaving it to God or even just wanting the best. That is something else entirely. And again, as I said, accountability, huge.
And it kind of comes back to this. This is a filmmaking concept, a writing concept, and I think one of the most important lessons for our faith today is show, don't tell. You know, if you spend all your time just telling people what to do, just telling people what they're supposed to do, just telling people, when I look at your life and you're the 51-year-old coming in to shame a 15-year-old kid, I don't care what you have to say.
Oh, yeah.
What you've shown me is not what I see in Jesus, right? So show us the effects of Jesus in your life. Show us the effects of, show us that you're a kinder person, a more compassionate person, a more loving person. Then tell, But if we can't see it in ourselves, in each other, in our elders, the credibility is lost.
I feel like I carried that experience with me into my freshman year of college, and it was so hard because, I'm in college now at this point, and I also have this experience of just kind of being talked down to by an elder who supposedly knows what's right, and no one said anything. It was just like, yeah, well, maybe he's right. It's like, no, I don't think so. And I could see exactly how someone could be completely disinterested in continuing to follow that and just be like, no, why am I putting so much effort into something that is getting kind of pushed down by other people that just kind of don't even want you there? Very easily, you could just be like, you know what, I'm going to go do something else entirely.
Yeah.
But I stuck it through for the first year. I actually kind of leaned on that newfound community that I got in college. And instantly, one of the most refreshing things about that is I got a sense of community that I didn't get in my church. It came at such a good time. I absolutely loved working with my advisor. His name was Paul Dibdahl, and he was awesome. I remember I asked him, I was like, I have two very particular things that I would like in my life. Even though I enjoy theology and studying and doing this, I feel like there's another call into another side of my life, which is just like the arts, like filmmaking and storytelling. And he simply told me, he was like, look, it's clear you love filmmaking. It's clear there's a connection there for you. And it's also clear that you would love to be a pastor. If you go into filmmaking, I don't think you're abandoning God, and he's not going to leave you or what you want from your relationship with him. And that's all I needed. It strengthened my personal faith in the possibility of a healthy community, but also the possibility of a healthy relationship personally with Christianity. Before, it kind of seemed so overly regimented and dry and just clear cut. This was the first time in a long time where it just felt attainable. It felt realistic. Christianity felt comfortable. It didn't feel like it was like, oh, you have to bend backwards to just like, do everything right and live exactly the way you're supposed to live to get the harmony and peace out of it. That brief interaction with my advisor was something that, if that's what my Hispanic church feared, man, I wish that they kind of understood. You don't have to latch on to the people that you care about to want them to have the absolute best that you can give them with your faith. Because again, I don't think that those very strict parents, for the most part, come at their kids from a place of control. For the most part, I know that there's always going to be pretty heavily toxic outliers where they legitimately are controlling. But for the most part, I do think that they're coming from a place of, We just want our kids to have God in their life, but they're doing it wrong. The very strange kind of like balance of a Hispanic church is that they can be incredibly welcoming and incredibly warm, right? But at the same time, with kind of their own kids, they can be much stricter than that.
Mhm.
But that doesn't erase the fact that they can be an incredibly enriching experience to visitors when they get them. These churches have existed for a long time. And the fact that even now they're still so kind of uh doing their own thing per se, it's just like I do wish there was a cleaner connection between the English and the Spanish, and just having it feel like one community. You're an Adventist, that's the community. That's it. It's the simplicity of that, right? It doesn't matter if they speak Spanish mostly in their sermon, it doesn't matter if they're going to be speaking English. It would be beautiful to be able to just look back on even the church that I was born in and feel like they have more of a future. Because right now they're there, but I just feel like they could have a shot of life just by feeling like they're a part of something bigger than just those 8 to 15 people that show up.
And I think you're touching on something that can really apply just to kind of the outcry of our generation. We're stuck in this situation where we're watching our elders repeat the same patterns of behavior that traumatized and damaged us over and over and over. We try to get involved, we're put down. We speak our minds, we say what's wrong, we're not listened to. And so eventually the majority of us give up. And so it's not really a loss of belief in God, although that might come if you've based your view of God on your local church experience. But I think we're in this interesting time now where so many churches are shrinking, graying, dying, and there's not a lack of desire. It's just that we're burnt out. So many of us have tried. So many of us have tried to find community, connection, all these different things, and we just couldn't find it. And even sometimes after multiple churches.
Oh, yeah.
And as you go through this, you pick up trauma after trauma after trauma, trying to find a healthy place, right? And you're just not seeing it. And one thing that I think is so important about your story is there's a clear calling on your life, but you're looking at kind of church and you have these experiences where it's like, but am I being called to that? I mean, right now there's a pastoral shortage. There's teacher shortages, right? There's these different things where people are like, can I be part of that particular way of doing it?
Mm-hmm.
And I can't tell you how many young people I've met who there's a clear calling on their life and sometimes a clear ministry calling on their life. But would they ever be a pastor in church as it exists now? Absolutely not, because churches aren't representing the kind of idea of a church that we even find in the Bible. It's a particular way of ministering, for sure, but it's not the only way. And sometimes it's definitely not the healthiest place to even start for us, or we might not even be tolerated once we get there.
That's a beautiful way to put the fact that if I want to be a pastor, I want to feel like I could do what I would do on a Saturday any other day of the week. And if that strips away the kind of known way to be a leader in a church, which is you are the one speaking in front of a congregation, I kind of like talking one-on-one. I like that kind of small connection. And I could see there being a lot of people that feel the same way. I don't know what the next step will be in ministry for the grand picture of Christianity, but it definitely feels like it would be happening sooner than later.
Yeah.
And if we have to try something a little different, that's okay. Like, what are we still just going to, the guy that put me down 15 years ago, is he going to pop up again now and be like, no, I thought I told you 15 years ago, you can't do that.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, no, come on. Like, we have to try to actually adapt and just do it. Like, what's the fear? I've definitely tried to bring my own sense of gospel into how I live my life with friends and people. And again, I continue to feel like that's the right way to do it, especially right now. A lot of people even enjoy or prefer to watch church through a live stream, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. If you're connecting, you're connecting. It's not really up to us to be like, well, no, the way you're experiencing God isn't, that's not as pure as it could be. There's no such thing as a watered down, like, faith. Like, oh yeah, you're doing it the wrong way. Like the best way to convert is to go into a church and listen to the pastor like 5 feet in front of you. Yeah. It's like, that's the only way. It's like, no.
And even how we minister, I think if you look at visitation, I love doing visitation. I love visiting people, talking about their life, working through problems with them. If you talk about sharing your faith, I love talking to people about my faith. I love talking to people about my God, right? All of those things. I even, do public speaking. And so all of those things sound like a pastoral job. But what I don't want is this regimented fit into the program week after week after week and molding to the expectations of the people in one particular building into something I'm not. All of that extra baggage, all of that extra mold that you get forced into, I can't imagine doing that to myself, and I can't imagine doing that to my family. And so it's this weird time where I feel like so many of us, we start projects for free. We talk to people and go get to work in our community for free. We give money. We give our time to things that are Christ-like causes. Yet when it comes to pastoral ministry, that's become something so far from kind of how we see that working, that it's just not something that is appealing, but it seems like a major hindrance to that good work we can be doing.
I feel like the best way to do that, to show people that you can do this differently, is to live it and try to do it in your day-to-day life. Because I appreciate good media like this, but sometimes that won't hit the ears of the people that probably need to hear it the most.
Yep.
The best way to do it is just to live it and actually do it. And I feel like that's the simplicity of the gospel. Like, that's how it should be. That's how I've always felt it should be. Just live it. Be good to people. Love them. Show them compassion. Let them know you are there for them. You're open. It's simple. And that's kind of what's so special about it. That love is simple. Circling back, that was kind of what was one of the things that briefly made me feel a little exhausted with my upbringing in my church, was just that it wasn't simple. It didn't feel simple. It felt incredibly tailored to fit a particular tradition that was kind of outdated. That's kind of one of the things that I really wish people from my generation or similar upbringing could experience more. It's just the feeling that you had when you were in church and you wanted to find that connection and that warmth and that love and that community, and maybe you weren't getting it there. Your feelings were very valid in wanting those things, right? Like, just because the people there maybe didn't give it to you in a fair way or even stood in your way, that doesn't mean that your feelings were invalid. Even now, 15 years later, 10 years later, 20 years later, however long it was since maybe they decided that, church isn't for me, or God isn't for me, or my faith didn't bring me anything good, so I'm not interested. I feel like all those people, they were giving a very unfair hand. It was just, it's not fair. And sometimes I do wish they could just know that they're just as valid in that whole experience of shaky Christianity.
So as somebody who's chosen to re-engage with the church, it doesn't mean my doubts went away. It doesn't mean my traumas went away. It doesn't mean that I am supportive of the bad behavior of Christians. That's part of why we do this show, to show the bad behavior that we fall into and the trauma we cause and what to do about it, right? I'm caught in this place right now where the last thing that I want to do is encourage people to re-enter spaces where they were traumatized, to be hurt again. And so I even have a hard time with people who have experienced a lot of difficulty with church, inviting them to places because I can't control what happens when they get there. What do I do? Just stick by me and nothing will, no. I want church to be a place that's already safe for them, but the reality is very often it's not. And the other side of this is if there was ever a time for people under 40 years old to re-engage with Christianity, it's right now. Because right now there's a massive generational shift happening and coming in the next decade where looking at the average age of a lot of Christian churches, looking at the age of a lot of our Christian leaders, pastors, there's about to be the biggest shift in leadership that jumps 20 years or more that we've ever seen. And the future of Christianity, of Adventism, of so many different things, it comes down to who decides to engage, who decides to stick around and be part of it. And I'm not saying that people have to attend a local church, listen to sermons, that kind of thing. But, is there an awareness? Are you engaged with members of church communities? Are you paying attention to what's happening? And do you believe that you have a role in creating something better in the future? Because I think if we put our heads together, we could. I really believe that. I feel a personal responsibility for all of the people, even people who aren't born yet, that will grow up in Christian spaces. I don't want them to have to go through the things that we did. I don't want them to feel like this. And it's only going to change if people who care about those things and see those things are around with them to create a different story.
Absolutely. And it wouldn't be fair for any generation that comes after us to have a Christian space without love. And I feel like if there's any responsibility that actually feels like it lies on us, is just being just kind of arbiters of that love, right? Like actually let them know this is not the time to be closed off. Let your friends know that they're loved and accepted for who they are. I think being able to just relate to people as we do, that shouldn't change just because of our faith.
Yeah.
Like that, and that shouldn't. And it's so weird that I have to say that, but I feel like I do.
If you had to identify the relational wall that started to grow between you and the church you grew up in, how would you describe it?
The wall that was being built up felt like it was one that was built up through a very unrealistic standard of how I could continue being a Christian, just through practice, through expectations. A lot of the times it would feel like for months on end, Saturday was just go and learn about the Old Testament. And that was it. And it was like, what am I getting out of that? And multiply that by multiple years, and you're growing up and things in the church aren't changing. And it's the same thing now. Instead of an 8-year-old, you're a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old. You're growing, your life is changing, but the church isn't, and the message isn't. And it also comes off like the way the church was run doesn't really care. It almost felt like it was just, well, today you're going to learn about Daniel. Okay. Next week, Daniel again. It's like, okay. These stories and messages can be incredibly powerful, but a lot of those years of my youth just felt like they were checking off boxes because they needed a sermon. And maybe that's a weakness of having to feel like you need a sermon to be the ministry of every week. Maybe ministry can be something else every week. But it didn't feel like anyone was truly caring about the message that they were trying to get to their congregation at the time. And yeah, the wall was just church felt like an artifact and not like a actual living, breathing, changing, adapting element to a healthy life.
Yeah.
And as I'm growing up, I'm like figuring all these things out, and meanwhile, church still feels like it's stagnating. And I'm just like, okay, I have passion for this, but it also feels like it's pushing me away. It was it was kind of sad because you could feel that. I know you probably can nail the point where you started to feel like it was no longer connecting with you. And it was like, oh, what's going on? Anyone that shared an experience like this can basically nail the time where they felt that disconnection.
I don't think at the time I went home and said, I'm never going back to church,
Mm-mm.
right? I think it was, I don't trust or feel safe or loved or seen or heard by this group of people. And I just can't see myself continuing to invest my time and energy and money into being part of it. And it wasn't a closed off to something else coming along, a different group of people, but it just kind of was this fading
Mm-hmm.
where it was like, all right, I'm kind of done. I'm not finding what church should be. And I don't believe anymore that there is one within driving distance of my home. And so, do I need this? I think that's how it worked for me. In this show, we have the walls, we have the damage, we have the traumas, we have all of these things that are done that are making it hard to connect with Jesus, right? It's Christians getting in the way of Jesus over and over and over. Let's talk about the bridge. How do we write a more hopeful future for the people coming behind us?
I think the number one thing for at least me, and maybe this could relate to someone else, you got to be more realistic in how you can have an effect on other people. And by that, it goes both ways. It would be, you have to know that you can have a negative effect on someone else. If you want to avoid things that you went through, then learn from the mistakes of the experiences that you went through. Even though sometimes it feels like we're kind of suffering for like the crimes that someone else did. But when it comes to this, we have to be very aware that if we don't learn from those mistakes, you never know. On a bad day, you might just say the wrong thing to someone and it could absolutely affect them. You have to be careful. But at the same time, I do believe that you have to be willing to just experience the openness of love without the fear of just, what if being too open, it brings on a negative connotation to who we are as Christians. Christianity and faith could learn a lot from just healthy interpersonal relationships with people. If you love someone, if you love your family, if you love your friends, if you love a stranger that you want to help, and like, why would anything else matter but to help them, be there for them? Helping them doesn't have to be a physical act. It could be you being present in their life as someone that they can talk to. I feel like people need to go through some sort of like, hey, this is how these things can negatively affect someone. And it's almost like the most basic sense of being accountable. And while that, I know, isn't a huge effort into complete restructure and rebuilding of a broken down state of being, it's a start. And I think that's a better start than maybe some of the places that I know I came from.
Yeah.
Because the place that I came from, I feel was missing a lot of that. It was missing accountability completely. It was missing an openness, and it was missing just kind of an effort to love without conditions. I think we need more of that. Absolutely. Now, where we go from there afterwards, hopefully with those things behind us, that would be a better place. But that's why we learn. But yeah, I mean, you got to start somewhere.